Hi, everyone. Welcome to my summit on healing from grief and loss. I'm so excited to have my expert speaker this morning, the beautiful and lovely and talented Teri Wellbrock. Welcome. She is an author, she's a speaker, she's a blogger. She is a therapy dog handler, and in her spare time, she even has her own podcast called The Healing Place. So make sure that you check that out. I'm thrilled that you're here. So welcome. I know you're a busy gal, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me today, Teri.
Oh, I feel honored, and I feel honored to be a part of it. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for you. So thank you for having me.
Yes, awesome. So I just want to start out by saying, the topic of grief it's such a hard thing for people to talk about. And of course, those of us that have gone through grief, it's hard to just deal with things because we feel so alone, and we sort of suffer in silence. And I really want to get across that there's so much out there for people to grasp onto. And I know that you have a bit of a story, and I'd love it if you just shared your story with us, and what you did to cope, and how you helped yourself through your grief.
Absolutely. So I call this my story of hope. And when I give my presentations, yes, I go through. So I'm going to start by sharing my trauma history very briefly. I won't go into tremendous detail, but just to paint a picture of my grief journey and my trauma journey. And then we can segue into what I did to overcome the results of PTSD, and actually complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, was the diagnosis I eventually received. So when I was 4 years old, an intoxicated parent attempted to drown me and my 1-year-old sister in a bathtub. When I was 5 years old, I was sexually molested for the first time by a 16-year-old neighbor. When I was 9 years old, I was sexually molested by a 19-year-old neighbor. When I was 10 years old, I was sexually accosted by my choir director repeatedly. When I was 14, I was sexually accosted by a religious education director in the basement of the rectory where I worked for the priests in the evening. When I was 16, I lost my virginity to date rape. Also, during my first 10 years of life, my dad was physically abusive until he sought counseling and stopped hitting me. When I was a youth downtown Cincinnati, the police officer in charge of that investigation, when I was 17, I had gone to trial, asked my parents to take me to dinner to celebrate the convictions, but he did not take me to dinner. He took me back to his apartment where he attempted to rape me. When I was 21, I was involved in a bank robbery where a gun was held to my head and my coworker was stabbed 3 times with a hunting knife. And then 3 months later, they had not caught those assailants. They would return to the bank, to our main office where I had just moved and my 19-year-old sister worked. And this time he would pull the trigger and murder my coworker. And my sister had just asked to go on break, and the person who was murdered, the young lady who was murdered, was the one that took my sister's place on the teller line. So soon after that, I started to experience severe panic attacks. And so, yeah, my grief journey is one of trauma, because grief isn't just about death. It's about loss. And so, yes, Marsha Berger's death had a profound impact on me. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Although it felt like a camel on me. Yeah. And so this journey through grief was about a lack of a relationship with my mother through her disease of alcoholism, the death of Marcia Berger, um, my loss of innocence, just a lot of loss. So that's my crazy trauma story. And then I spent the next 25 years of my life experiencing severe panic attacks. And then I found my way in 2013 onto the healing path. And I can certainly talk about then my healing journey and the hope part of my story, since that part is I call it the ugly facts.
Wow. Yes, I would love it if you, shared some more with us in your healing journey, because something in your story is similar to someone else's story. So I'd love it if you just would continue to, share.
Awesome. So yeah, so in 2013, I'd finally I just hit a proverbial wall where I couldn't take it anymore, never knowing every day how severe the panic attack was going to be. So I sought out counseling and with the talk therapist, and we did a little bit of work for a few weeks, and then because of my trauma history, God bless her soul, I just admire her because she said, Teri, I think we've done as much work as we can. Have you ever considered EMDR therapy? And I was like, what the heck is EMDR therapy? And so I started to research, and it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so I reached out to one of the top therapists here in Cincinnati, and she said, well, I'm not taking new cases, but your story intrigues me. So yes, come in and let's talk. And funny story, because we're going to talk about my therapy dog, Sammy, but she has a therapy dog, Cody. And so when I sat on her couch, Cody, snuggled up next to me, and she had called it an interview. And at the end of our little interview session, she said, I will take you on as a new patient. It was really Cody that was interviewing you. So I was like, all right, well, I got approval by Cody. So yeah. And so I started this 4-year 98 session journey through this trauma. And I've explained it as like a Christmas ball of lights that's tangled. And we just had to slowly untangle this mess of trauma that had been so intertwined and very complex, which is why I got the complex PTSD diagnosis. And started that journey. But in the meanwhile, I was working as in a mental health agency with children, and I was helping them create these toolboxes. And so fascinating to me because I was never correlating my trauma with the things that kids were experiencing, but I noticed myself being triggered by things that kids would bring up from abuse or neglect in their households. And so as I helped these kids build their toolboxes, I started to just research everything I could on trauma. And I started to come across the healing benefits of meditation, the healing benefits of yoga. I was invited by a friend to attend a speaking engagement, and this person talked about Ho'oponopono Hawaiian healing. And so I started to practice that. I started to use, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of all the things that I started to utilize. Well, I created this coping guide for myself, and it had all of the things that, why am I drawing a blank? Oh, my favorite, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness. So mindfulness practice became a huge part of my healing. So it wasn't just therapy with a mental health professional, but it became changing my habitual patterns and changing my outlook and almost embracing my loss and my grief and the emotions that were attached to my trauma, as if giving them a hug and saying, you know what, you were here for a reason. You were here. And now it's time for me to heal you. And I'm starting to get emotional talking about it, because I, instead of fearing what would arise, I started to embrace it and welcome it, so that I could heal it.
Wow. That's yeah, that's some pretty powerful stuff for sure. I'm very inspired that you know, you took the steps that you did and created something to help yourself, and clearly you know, it's going to help others. Is there a way that the audience would be able to reach you, or um, be able to get these tips for themselves?
Absolutely, yes. If they go to my website, which is teriwellbrock.com, and it's TERI, just one R with an I, and then WELLBROCK, then when there's a pop-up that comes up, or up in the right-hand corner is a subscribe button, then there is a panic attack and anxiety coping guide, and it's free to download. Yeah, and so that goes through all of the things that I have utilized, and I've added so much more, and things even such as prayer. And I'm not talking on a religious level, but I'm talking just prayer can be being out in nature, and just, whether it's God, whether it's universe, whether it's angels, whether it's a tree, whatever it is that you connect to, has been very powerful. Nature is a huge, huge healing modality, and just being in the calm. And I practice mindfulness a lot. And I can certainly go into the details of mindfulness, and the benefits of mindfulness if you would like. We talk about it a lot on the Healing Place podcast. The guests that I interview, so I bring guests on, as I say, to shine the light of hope into the world. And I've learned so much from these guests, because they talk about the work that they do as healers and trauma warriors, as I call them,
Right.
in the world. I had someone on recently who talked about suicide. And I know this is a grief summit, and hers was a very powerful interview to talk about the impact of not just death, but death by suicide, and the resources that are available to help families and children in that grief journey.
Yes, there's so many different avenues to grief and loss. You're right, and mindfulness is such a big part. I know even with meditation, that was something that helped me, and you know, nature. I'm you know, lucky enough to live in the country, so I've got nature all around me, and animals, you know, are a big thing for me too. Horses are very therapeutic, and you know, just having the farm animals, you know, they helped me through. Did you want to just touch a little bit on mindfulness before we go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my 5-4-3-2-1 mindfulness that I practice, and it was actually something my therapist had shared with me, along with breathing. She gave me 2 breathing techniques to utilize, which was 4 square breathing, and then the rolling breath. But mindfulness, so what I do is I find 5 things to look at and explain them in tremendous detail to myself. And so if I'm taking a walk and I see a beautiful flower, I'll not just look at, oh, look at that pretty flower, but the I can't even say the word, the details, how's that? I was trying to say intricacies of the flower. And and notice, is there a little bee inside of it? Is there a little bug crawling on it? And then And again, the whole practice of mindfulness is to bring ourselves not into the worries of the future or the pain of the past, but right here in this present moment, in the beauty and the joy, and ground ourselves in what we have, and that's this moment right now. And using our senses is really helpful for that. So the 5 fine things to look out, find 4 things to hear, to listen to, and stretch your hearing as far as it can go. 3 things to touch, 2 things to smell, and 1 thing to taste. And again, it's just, I normally never even get past 4 because I can just feel myself calming. And I just become so engrossed in that moment of whatever it is I'm experiencing through my senses.
Oh, I love it. I love that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's wonderful. So is that part of your guide is that a bit that's going to be in your guide that we can
Yes.
have a link to? Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I will post a link, and our audience can feel free to go in and download your guide, which I think is going to be amazing. I can't wait to get it. So that's wonderful. I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule and for sharing with us some pretty raw stuff. I'm very grateful to have had you today, and I look forward to you and I connecting more. And just want to thank you again, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And have a beautiful day, and just remember to know that you're not alone, and be kind to yourself. And I'm going to say bye for now, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me be a part of this.
Thank you, Teri, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.